Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of Matthew's Gospel. We're in the middle of the missionary sermon in chapter 10. Jesus has called the 12, and he has given them their limited commission in verses 5 through 15, and now in verse 16, he's really going to get down to some existential business. This is who you are, and this is the way the world is. You may have offered a bit of protest yesterday that I left verse 15 uncommented on, about it would be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for the towns that reject them. And does that in any way communicate levels of hell? Well, we're going to talk about that later in a later chapter when he talks about when Jesus is by himself and he gives his woes to Bethsaida and Chorazin. But I do want to look at verse 15 just quickly to say that the idea of judgment is throughout. This is as well an eschatological sermon, every bit as much as the eschatological sermon in 24 and 25 is, because there's judgment understood throughout. And there's judgment at the end of that limited commission. We're going to read verses 16 through 23. This is an interesting passage. There's a lot of critters in this passage, you know. There's sheep and wolves and serpents and doves and sparrows. I mean, lots of critters flying around, hopping around. We got reptiles, we got mammals, and we got avians. We just do. These animals serve to tell us a lot about ourselves. Verse 16. This is a verse for the ages. This is a verse that just stands out as something we should paint on a wall and remember every day. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. Beware of men, for they will deliver you over to the courts and flog you in their synagogues, and you will be dragged before governors and kings for my sake, to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. When they deliver you over, don't be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and father will deliver and father his child, and children will rise against their parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all for my sake. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next, for truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor is a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciple to be like his teacher, and the servant like his master. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebul, how much more will they malign those of his household? So much here. And as I said a few episodes ago, Jesus really is their coach with the game plan and inspiring them to action, but he's not Ted Lasso. I mean, he's very realistic, and the facts of the matter are hard. The first thing he says is, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. I am sending you out as prey in the land of predators. That's who you are, and that's why your head has to be in the game. You have to be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. I don't know if he's using wise as serpents to, well, I know how he's using it. He's talking about survival wisdom. I'm not sure that the Hebrews had the same categories as the Greeks did, different kinds of wisdom. The owl, the philosophical wisdom of the owl, and the street smarts of the snake, because snakes are not well liked. And we are not either as Christians, not in the grand scheme of things. But I know that he's talking about survival skills. Be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves. And let me say this, you can't be as harmless as a dove if you're not as wise as a serpent. You have to have your head in the game and think this through. You have to be ready for what's about to come. And I'm telling you what's about to come. And I don't want you to be afraid of what's about to come because you know what it is ahead of time. And you know that in the moment you're going to be given what you need. That's what he said to them. He introduces the notion of God's Spirit. Wow. They're going to learn more about that. John's Gospel tells us that. But we have the notion of God's Spirit in us, answering for us. He's going to say it's going to get so bad that parents are going to hand their children over, children are going to hand their parents over. If you read Fox's Book of Martyrs, you know that happened. We have historical evidence that that happened. This is what is going to happen. And he says, if you're persecuted in one town, go to the next town. He didn't say, you have to stay and be persecuted if you can go to another town and preach, for the simple fact that you're needed, that other places need to hear the gospel too. And if you have a chance to go someplace else and preach, then you do that because the message is primary. So he tells them to do that. You're not going to get done. I mean, the evangelistic work that you're beginning on this trip will not be done before the Son of Man comes. And then he reminds them something that he'll remind them again at the very end. In fact, on the night that he is betrayed, when they have the Last Supper, John tells us this. A servant, in John 15, a servant isn't greater than his Lord. If they hate me, they're going to hate you. If they're not afraid to call me the Prince of Devils, when they've seen that I'm a miracle worker, what are they going to be doing to you when they're not so afraid of you as they are of me? It's quite a sobering message and also a necessary one. I kind of think of these verses as some sort of intellectual boot camp. This is how it's going to be. Our guys who serve and who are going to serve in harm's way, in addition to that basic training, have to go through survival training and POW training and all this stuff. They have to do that so that when the moment happens, they're ready for it. And to me, that's what Jesus is doing here. And he's doing it not just for them, but he's doing it for us too. Because everything he says to them, he says to us as well. Okay. We'll pick up with verse 28. Next time, he's going to say, don't be afraid and tell us why. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.